everyone.
Hello.
I'm really, really glad to see you all here. I mean, I guess every speaker probably says that, but I really do feel that way. I'm really quite aware that some of you who are in here are hurting right now, that you're in relationships that are difficult for you right now. I'm just very glad that you're here wanting to get some help around that and maybe try some different things than you've been doing. If you're a counselor or a therapist working with loved ones, I welcome you as well, because we certainly need more people in that field. So, I don't have a microphone tonight because it's dead. So, if one of my biggest bugaboos when I come to hear someone is if I can't hear them. So if you can't hear me, please let me know, and I will speak up to the best of my ability. I've got a little bit of a throat thing going on tonight, and you'll probably see me suck on a few mints, but seriously, if you can't hear me, let me know that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for a little while, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. That being said, if you have a burning question that can't wait, or if you need some clarification about something that I've said, feel free to, raise your hand and let me know that. I do have a fair bit of information that I want to give to you tonight, so in the interest of time, I may move you on. Even if we're answering your question, I may move it on. Please don't take that personally if I do that. I will be here afterwards if you want to come and talk to me. And I thought that I would start, usually I start with my story so that you have a sense of who I am. I'm going to come around front a little bit here.
There is chair here.
The chair's so the relevant part of my story starts in 1973 when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And if there's anybody that doesn't know what Crohn's disease is, it's an inflammatory bowel illness. It's very painful, very debilitating. I've been very, very, very sick in my life with it. I am no longer most days because I've learned how to take care of myself. So even though they say that there's no cure for this, I'm kind of almost cured because I take good care of myself. So we're going to talk about self-care tonight. So in 1973, when I was diagnosed, the doctors at that point didn't have any real idea what to do with me. They hadn't heard much about Crohn's. They'd heard about colitis, which is the same kind of illness, but just in a little bit of a different part of the bowel. And in fact, they medicated me for colitis for a while, which was not helpful at all. Because they didn't know what to do for me, what they did was they gave me a whole lot of painkillers. They gave me a lot of Valium. They gave me a lot of codeine and Demerol, which would probably be kind of like today's OxyContin. And they kept giving that to me and giving that to me and renewing my prescriptions. And me, I'm a good girl. I follow directions, especially when it comes from a doctor, right? I mean, bless their hearts. They really didn't know what to do, and they wanted to be helpful, and they weren't sure how to be. Unfortunately, today, there are doctors who are still doing this, and I don't understand that because there's so much information around addiction, but don't get me started. But at that point, this is what they knew to do. So they gave me all of this medication that I took faithfully, week after week, month after month, year after year, and if you, I also developed an addiction to marijuana at that point. I had used that in university. Even though I inhaled, I did inhale. There wasn't a problem for me around pot in university, but with the Crohn's, there became a problem, and I used it a lot. I really understand medical marijuana, but it's addictive, and anybody's body would get addicted to any of those substances. So my body got addicted to those substances. And if you fast forward 14 years, in 1987, I reached a bottom. I was so depressed. All of those substances are depressants in the system. So I'd been taking all of those depressants, including pot. That's a depressant too. I think that's my phone. Really annoying me. Can everybody turn off their cell phones? In 1987, I was so depressed that I had become suicidal. And I was thinking about suicide. I was planning it in my mind. I certainly had enough pills. I had a plan. I had the opportunity. I had the suicide plan. But what I know about people who are suicidal today, what I know for sure, is that most people who are suicidal do not want to die. Most of them don't want to live the way they've been living, but they don't really want to die. Some of them do, and the ones who do want to die. But the ones who don't, and I was one of those. So I reached out for help. Hello. And I was sent to a suicide counseling agency called SAFER here in Vancouver. They helped me so much. I actually voluntarily signed myself into VGH Psych Ward and stayed there for about 3 weeks because I was really afraid I would kill myself if I wasn't somewhere where I couldn't get at my clothes and, you know, somebody to take care of me. I didn't find out until later that they could actually keep me. Even though I was voluntary, they could keep me. I didn't know that, but they did let me go. So while I was there, I met some other people who were trying to come off alcohol and drugs, and they started going to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, which is what I started doing too, and that was the beginning of my recovery. I don't go to 12-step meetings anymore. I did for years and years. I'm meeting with clients every day, and to go to meetings on top of that is too much for me. But if I ever felt like I needed a meeting, I would go to a meeting. So just to make that clear. I'm neither a proponent or an opponent of 12-step programs. I know that they don't work for everybody, and there are alternatives, thankfully, now. So we'll maybe talk about that tonight too. We'll see whether that comes up. But so that started my recovery in 1987, and at that point, you needed 3 years to be able to work. You needed 3 years clean and sober to be able to work in the field of addiction. So I took some courses, and I was already a counselor, albeit a hypocritical counselor because I was getting high. But I was a counselor. I had been a teacher before that. And as I learned about addiction, I really knew that I wanted to give back. So many people had helped me that I wanted to be able to give back and you know, help other people with the same thing. And it also helped me to help them. So in 1991, when I had my 3 years, I went and got a job in the downtown east side, come in please, at an agency called Watari. Yeah, come around this way. I think there are some seats over here. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. So Watari is in the downtown east side. It's right on Hastings. It's in the war zone. I was the first counselor that they hired, and I was there for 16 years as an addictions counselor. And it was the best education I could ever get, because basically I can work with anything now. Nothing really surprises me. I don't work with everything. There are some things I choose not to work with, but it was just an amazing time being down there. And then it got to be time to leave. So in 2007, I left Watari and went into full-time private practice, which I am still in. And kind of never looked back from that because I love being in private practice, for any of you who are thinking of doing that. While I was at Watari, I began getting, I was working with the alcoholics and the addicts in the downtown east side, or in East Vancouver as well, low-income areas. I started to get phone calls from their families and their partners and their friends wanting to come and talk to me. So this was something that I didn't seek out. It kind of sought me out. And as I was listening to their stories, I mean, at first I had no idea what to tell them. I had never gotten any training. What kind of training is there for that? There isn't any, unfortunately. I do some training now with people, but at that point there was no training. So I'd listen to them, and what I would hear were behaviors that they were doing with their addicted loved ones, who they loved dearly, that just couldn't be right. I mean, these behaviors they were telling me about could not be healthy, like driving the addict to the dealer, that kind of thing. How can that be a healthy thing to do with an addict? So I decided to write the workbook, which also has won some awards, I'm happy to say. I'm proud of the work that I've done. I never ever thought that I would be able to do anything that would be helpful to the world when I was in my addiction and when I was in my early recovery. Never thought that would happen for me. So it can happen. I'm living proof that it can happen, that people can change. If you have an addicted loved one right now, this can change, but you may need to do some changing first. And that's the message tonight. So, the other thing that I'll tell you before I leave off on my story is that in July, I will be celebrating 26 years clean and sober. And you know what? If I can do it, anybody can do it. Really, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And this is what I know for sure, and this is how I work with people too. You can do it if you make a choice. You can change your life if you choose to do that.
I have 38 years clean.
Congratulations. This reminds me of the recovery day that we celebrated in September. Were you there? Where we counted up all of the recovery time of all the people who were there, and I think there was like 16,000 years who were there. It was awesome. It was awesome. So I'd like to look at what addiction is really. It's a really important thing to look at, and I come from a different place with this. I know that some of the things I say tonight may be a little provocative to some people. You may disagree with me. I'm really okay with that. Whatever works for you is fine with me. I'm just going to tell it to you the way I see it. So when I'm talking about addiction, I'm talking about addiction across the board, all kinds of different addictive behaviors. It's not just alcohol and drugs. I deal a lot with alcohol and drugs, but I also work with eating disorders, smoking, gambling, internet addiction, porn addiction, sex addiction, they kind of go hand in hand, compulsive overspending, relationship addiction, codependency. Codependency is an interesting thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, it's kind of a buzzword in our language today. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit when we get to that about what codependency really is, because I have a feeling that some of you are codependent if you're the loved ones of addicts. Or if you're therapists and counselors, you might be codependent too. So we're going to talk about that. So there are many, many schools of thought about addiction. There are a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions and ideas about what addiction is. For example, the people who are in 12-step programs, the 12-steppers, really see addiction as a disease. They go by the disease model. There may be some of you in here who believe that. I personally have some difficulty with that because I have a disease. I have a medical disease that I can't just stop. I can't just say to myself, gee, I think I just won't have Crohn's disease anymore. Oh, I wish I could. Somebody with cancer, diabetes, can't just say, gee, I think I just won't have this anymore. But with addiction, I'm simplifying it, but it's true. With addiction, you can just stop it. It's not that easy. There are things you need to do, but it really is that simple. You can just stop, and this condition can be arrested. So even though there is brain involvement, and even though there is physical, definitely, involvement, and mental involvement with addiction, I don't see it the same as if it's a disease. And sometimes I also hear from people that, I have a disease, I can't help it. Well, yeah, you can, Yeah, you can help it, if you choose to help it. So sometimes the disease model gives people license, in a way, to just keep doing what they're doing. I have a little bit of an issue with that, too. So that's one school of thought about addiction, is that it's a disease. Another is that there is a genetic predisposition to addiction, and I think there probably is. I don't believe at this point that there's any actual, real, true scientific proof about that. I haven't heard it if there is, but I see it all the time. And it's like people who are born to alcoholic parents, for example, sometimes have this almost like an allergy to the substance. They have a little bit of it and they're gone. They're gone, And that makes me think that there is a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, maybe drug addiction as well, the mind-altering addictions. Now with the mood-altering addictions, like smoking or gambling or internet or shopping or, even eating disorders, they often, another part of the school of thought is that we learn what we live. So what we've grown up with is really important. It's really important to take a look at what we've grown up with, because even if you grew up with alcoholic parents, for example, I'm just using alcohol as an example, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the genetic predisposition. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have the allergy to it. But if you grew up in a home where, when the going got tough, the tough reached for an addiction, instead of dealing with what was tough, instead of dealing with the reality of what was tough and working through that, then the chances are really good that you're going to reach for an addiction too. It might not be the same addiction, but you're going to reach for something that's going to stuff your feelings down. And I see codependency as an addictive behavior, by the way, so we will get into that. So those are kind of the schools of thought about addiction. For me, the way I work with people and what I know about my own life is that underneath all of that, I don't care if it's a disease, I don't care what you've learned. I mean, I care, but I don't care. I don't work with it as if I care. I don't care whether you grew up in an addicted home. Addiction is a choice. Plain and simple, it's a choice. Because even if it is a disease, even if I'm totally wrong and it's a disease, you can still choose not to go there. And millions of people in AA and NA and all of the 12-step programs who believe that addiction is a disease choose to not do that, myself included. So it's a choice, always. You're either going to deal with the reality of life or you're not. And your addicted loved ones are either going to deal with the reality of their lives or they're not. And you're either going to deal with the reality that you're being faced with in these relationships, or you're not. But you're here tonight, and that tells me that you want to deal. And I'm glad. I'm happy for you because it's going to make your life easier. Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say about that is that I talk about the loved ones. I'm going to ask how many people in here are loved ones of addicts or alcoholics, addicts of any kind. You don't have to raise your hand, but I'd like to have kind of a sense. How many of you are? All right. So take a look around. Keep your hand up. Take a look around. And please understand that you're not alone, because that helps with the shame of what you're feeling about this. I'm so glad you're all here. I talk about loved ones of addicts as being addicted to the addict's addiction. And what I mean by that is that when the addict is doing well, when the addict's up here, you're doing well. But when the addict isn't doing well, you're not doing so good. And then the addict does well and you're doing well. And then it goes out and you're not doing so well. And so you are on that roller coaster. And the first thing that needs to happen in order for an addict to change is for you to get off that roller coaster. Planting a seed, which I'll talk about more. So the next thing we'll talk about what do we know about families that are struggling with addiction, families, friends? There's a visual that I'd kind of like to do with you. I know we started a bit late, but I'd like to do this. Addicts, what we know is that addicts are not the only ones suffering in this situation. The loved ones are suffering just as much. The addicts are suffering, it's true, of course, but the loved ones are also suffering, and that isn't addressed very often. And again, very often, the loved ones of addicts don't talk to each other for a variety of reasons, and shame is one of the biggest ones. So, who would be one person, actually I'll backtrack. Can I get a volunteer from the audience to come up and represent an addict? Thank you. Some addicted in isolation and they don't recover in isolation, and they need you. They need you to support them. They need you to be there with them. They really do. And I know how much you love the people in your lives who are addicted, or you wouldn't be here today. They need you to be there, but they need you to be healthy. They need you to be doing the right things. They don't need you there if you're going to enable them, so we're going to talk about that too. And the last thing that we know about families who struggle with addiction is that there are not nearly enough services for you guys. It's starting to change, but there are not enough services. And there are not enough therapists and counselors who are working with loved ones who are making that a niche for themselves and learning how to do that. So I'm on a mission to change that. Because we've got lots and lots and lots of treatment centers and detoxes and recovery houses and all these programs for addicts of all different kinds. And what about you guys? There's not much there. There's a little bit, but there's not much. And that needs to change.
Candace, do you know if there's anything in Canada like Five Sisters?
You're going to need to speak up.
Is there anything in Canada like Five Sisters in California?
I'm not sure what Five Sisters is in
Oh,
California.
well, not better. It's essentially foreign English. It's a 12-day treatment
Yes,
program.
what we have here, I don't know of any actual treatment centers for codependent people, for loved ones, but I know that several of the treatment centers, like Edgewood, around here, Edgewood, Cedars, those kind of Pacifica, they have family programs for the loved ones of their clients. And I think you can also go, if your loved one isn't in that program, I think you can also go to that program. I'm going to talk a little bit later about a few resources that I do know of. So that's a good question. I just don't know in that particular place. So what I'd like to do is get into 3 of the top 10 tips. I think that, of course I would think that all of these tips are important, because I wouldn't have written about them. But I think that there are 3 that really stand out. They go along with all of the other ones, so please read about the other ones as well. But I want to talk to you about 3 that really need to be talked about tonight. So the first one, and you've got these in your handout, the first one is tip number 3, and if you have a book with you, it's page 165. You cannot control or fix another person, so stop trying. And this is a really hard one for people to wrap their heads around. You do not control anybody other than the person that is sitting on your butt right now. There is nobody else in this world that you control. if you're trying to change someone and they go along with what you want them to do, that's because they are choosing to go along with what you want them to do. It's not because you have any power over them. They might not like the consequence of what happens if they don't go along with you, but it's still their choice to go along with you. Are you finding it stuffy in here? Did you open the door?
Yes.
Thank you. Somebody open that door? Get some bathroom. So tip number 3, you cannot control or fix another person, so stop trying. And with each tip, I have a quote from other people, and this one is my favorite. Never try to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of your time and it annoys the pig. And this is from Robert Heinlein, who is a magnificent science fiction writer, and he wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, among many others. If you have not read Stranger in a Strange Land, you might want to do that. It's amazing. I have all my life felt like a stranger in a strange land, so I could really relate to that book, but it's great. So Robert Heinlein, yeah, it's a waste of your time and it annoys the pig. In order to shift what it is that you've been doing so that you can actually help your addicted loved one and yourself, you're going to need to unlearn some old behaviors. You've probably been doing the same kinds of things for a really long time, and you probably learned some of these behaviors in childhood, and a lot of you are, I can say this because I'm old, a lot of you are old-ish. You've been alive for a while, and you've been doing these behaviors for a while. So you're going to need to learn how to do some new behaviors, unlearn the old ones. I have a checklist in the book. If I can find it. Actually, it might actually be in a different... Yeah, I think it's in a different tip, so I'll try to find it in the other tip. But one of the things that I use to really help people understand that they can't control or fix somebody else is the serenity prayer. And you probably know the serenity prayer. It's in your handouts. God, whatever God means to you, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Well, you know, in 12-step programs at the end of meetings, as many of you have been to them, you know, they put their arms around each other, or they hold hands, and they say it like this, just like this. They say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that's the end of the meeting. That's how they say it. And I started thinking, well, what does this prayer really actually mean? I mean, it's very profound. It's this tiny little prayer, and it's amazingly profound. God, grant me the serenity. The serenity, the calmness, the peace. If you're here tonight, you probably don't have much of that in your life because you're on the roller coaster most of the time. So you're wanting serenity, you're wanting calmness. To accept the things I cannot change. So, what can't you change?
Other people.
Yeah, you can say that now. Other people. Other people. What else can't you change?
Everything around you. The
Everything
environment.
around you? Specifically, what else can't you change?
The weather.
The weather. Yeah, I mean, if you don't want the sun to come up tomorrow morning, hopefully it still will, you know. Oh, well. Anything else you can't change?
Things that have already happened.
Great, things that have already happened. They're done. Time? I mean, how did I get to be 63? Just celebrated 63 a couple of weeks ago. How did that happen? I don't know. No control over that. We all have exactly the same life style, life things that happen to us, and that's one of them. So, to accept the things I cannot change, instead of trying to change the things I can't change. The courage to change the things I can, and why do you think it says courage?
It's hard.
Because it's hard. It's hard. We need courage to change things that we can change. What can we change? Ourselves. What else can we change? let's say you've got a little 5-year-old, and you say to that 5-year-old, go clean up your room. And the 5-year-old says, no, I won't. I'm not going to clean my room up. And you say, well, if you don't clean your room up, you can't watch TV tonight. And the 5-year-old starts screaming, I hate you, you're a terrible mother. And has a choice to make. He's either going to go and clean his room up, or he's not. And it's going to depend on the consequence. If he doesn't like the consequence of not following through on what you ask him to do, he won't do it. Am I right? And for parents that don't give consequences, they're in for a world of hurt. So you tell him you're not going to watch TV, he goes up and cleans his room, and you think, hot dang, I got it. I'm controlling my little 5-year-old. I got it. No, you don't. You've given him a choice. He's made a choice. And that's how it is. But the courage to change the things we can, being willing to look inside and change who we are, to become healthier, to help our addicted loved ones, that takes courage. And you're all very brave and courageous to be here tonight. And I sincerely mean that.
Would that be like tough love?
It is like tough love. It's exactly what it's like. And tough love is still love. At least I think it is. The last line of the serenity prayer, of this serenity prayer, is the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's the most important line of this prayer, because if you don't have the wisdom to know what you can change, the wisdom between what you can change and what you can't change, you're going to keep trying to change what you can't change. I think probably some of you have been doing that. And how's that working for you, as Dr. Phil would say? Not so well. So when you say not so well to the question, how's that been working for you? Do you want to try something different? Is the next question. Now, I was given another form of the serenity prayer, another verse of the serenity prayer, and I just want to read it to you. It's not in your handouts. But if anybody wants it, you can email me and I can send it to you. So, it's this prayer: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Grant me the patience to accept the changes that take time, the appreciation of all that I have, the tolerance of those with different struggles, and the strength, I love this, to get up and try again one day at a time. Beautiful, huh? I don't know where this came from. I mean, I know who sent it to me, but I don't know who wrote it, but it's beautiful. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 5, which is on page 80-something, 85. Learn the difference between helping and enabling. You must tonight go away. This is my biggest goal, that you must go away knowing the difference between helping and enabling. And the quote that I'm using comes from 12-Step Programs. I wish I could take credit for it. I so wish I could, because I love it. It's so simple. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And the converse is true. If one little tiny thing changes, if something changes, something changes. Okay? So, why do we, as loved ones, I am a loved one as well, why do we keep trying to help our addicted loved ones? Because we love our addicted loved ones. We love them, we're afraid for them. They're driving us crazy, but we love them and we're very, very afraid for them in many cases, depending on what it is they're doing to themselves and what they're doing to us and the people around us. But one of the biggest mistakes, one of the biggest mistakes that people like yourselves make, and I include myself in that in past tense, before I even talk about what the mistake that we're making, the reason we make the mistake is because we're codependent. So let's talk about codependency. And I think codependency and people-pleasing are the same thing. So how many people in here would consider themselves to be people-pleasers? Raise your hands up. Own it. Most women in our society are people-pleasers. Many occupations require us to be people-pleasers. Some men are people-pleasers too. The simple definition that I use for codependency is when we put other people's needs ahead of our own on a fairly consistent basis, which usually means over and over and over. Why do we do this? Because we're people-pleasers. I'm a recovering people-pleaser. I don't consider myself to be a people-pleaser. I am a recovering people-pleaser. I hardly ever people-please anymore. When I do, it feels really, really icky. Oh, I hate it. I used to do it all the time. The reason that we are people-pleasers, we think that we're very nice people, right? I mean, tell me what you want me to do for you. I'll take a grenade for you, as Bruno Mars says. Right? I'll lie on the street for you, man. Just tell me what you want me to do. I'm so nice. But I'm not that nice, and neither are you. And you're not doing it because you're nice. And I'm not saying that you're not nice people, because you are. But you're not that nice. You're doing it because you don't want to deal with conflict. You don't want to have to deal with confrontation. You don't want somebody to get mad at you, or disappointed in you, or frustrated with you. You don't know how to handle that. You've never learned how to handle that. Nobody's ever taught you. And you probably grew up in a home where there was hell to pay when somebody got angry at you. You might have gotten beaten. You might have gotten severely abused if somebody was angry with you. So you learned how to not have that happen. That ain't gonna happen. And you went through your whole life making sure that nobody ever got mad at you. This needs to stop. The trick is to learn how to deal with, as adults now, to learn how to deal with somebody else's anger, with somebody else's frustration or disappointment with you in an assertive way. To be able to say to somebody, I'm not happy with your behavior right now. This is not okay with me. I don't like the fact that you're yelling at me. Stop yelling at me, or I'm leaving. Now, again, I'm simplifying it. It is that simple. It's not that easy. And you may need to work with somebody like me, who can help you figure out from whence this came and how you can change it, but you need to change it. And you need to stop people-pleasing. It's not serving you, and it's not serving the addict. How can it be a loving act for you to allow the addict in your life to get away with what he or she, probably use he more than she, but what he's doing? How can it be a loving act for you to allow that to happen because you're afraid of confrontation? How can that be a good thing? So, when I talk about the difference between helping and enabling, I'll again give you some simple definitions that I use. An enabling behavior is a behavior that pretty much keeps the addiction going. Like driving an addict to a dealer. That's like an extreme example of enabling. There's lots of little ones, different ones. A helping behavior is a behavior that will assist the addict to stop using whatever the addiction is. So when you want to use a helping behavior, what you need to do is have consequences and boundaries. Gulp. Set a boundary with an addict, are you kidding me?
Could you repeat those, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
An enabling behavior is one that keeps the addiction going. A helping behavior is a behavior that basically assists the addiction to stop, assists the addict to stop. So, boundaries are incredibly important. Boundaries are the consequences of the continued action, like with the 5-year-old. Sometimes we have to treat the addicts in our lives like 5-year-olds, because that's kind of how they're acting. So, boundary setting is a 3-part process. The first part is knowing what your boundaries are. And boundaries are going to be different for each people, for each person, each family. You have to figure out what your boundaries really are that you will stand behind. And you may need some help figuring that out, and that's fine. Please get the help you need to do this. So, you know your boundaries. The second phase of boundary setting is setting the boundary. So you need to know how to speak the boundary to the addict and how to deal with what may be the fallout. And again, you probably are going to need some help with this if you're not good at setting boundaries. If you haven't been doing that, if you've never really learned how to do it and you don't have any practice doing it, you're not going to be doing it. But, you know, there's this great commercial on TV. It's for Wonder Bread, like icky Wonder Bread, white paste Wonder Bread. The tagline of that commercial is, little by little, we become less little. So the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. I can tell you that when I first started public speaking, I thought I was going to vomit all over you. I've done it enough now that I get nervous, but I don't have to do that. Little by little, we become less little. The more we do something that we're uncomfortable with, that we don't know how to do. The third part of setting boundaries is the most important part, I think, even though all of them are important. Like, there's this place on your body. It's right about here. And if you poke yourself there, go ahead, poke yourself right there. Find that place and poke yourself. It hurts, right? Ow. This is what the addict is going to do to you, because as soon as you set boundaries, as soon as you start setting a boundary, you're going to get tested. You're going to get tested, I guarantee it. And they're going to keep doing this until you cave or really stand firm. They're banking on you caving, because you always have, and they get what they want that way. But the most important thing you can do is stand firm in your boundaries. So you need to know your boundary, set your boundary, and maintain your boundary. As soon as you cave, you might as well have not said a word. Same old, same old. This is why it's important to know what the boundary is that you can really stand behind, and how to deliver it. Here's the deal. This is like the whole nugget of tonight. I'm going to tell you the secret. The whole thing is about helping the addict become really uncomfortable with the choice he's making, he or she is making. This also means that you're going to be uncomfortable with the new behaviors you're doing. Please understand, this is you're doing work too here. But your job is to make it uncomfortable for them. I'm sure that there are people sitting in this room who have allowed the addicts to run roughshod over them. You know, there are probably people in here who are now currently allowing an addicted adult, child maybe, or partner to live at home, not pay any rent, not contribute to the household, be actually quite obnoxious and abusive in the household. They're using in the house, they're high at night, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning banging pots and pans in the kitchen, making a snack, high as a kite. You're all trying to sleep. Oh, well, you don't say anything to an addict because he might get angry with you. No. If the addict does not become uncomfortable, they'll just keep on doing what they're doing. If you've got a shopping addict, the credit cards are maxed out, and you keep paying that addict's rent and bills so that they don't get into trouble with legally, they don't get into trouble with, their finances, why should they do anything else? Why should they change anything? Why should an addict change unless there's consequences? For me, the consequence was getting to be suicidal. That was a pretty big consequence. I was uncomfortable. And I decided I didn't like my life that way. And that's what we're trying to do with the addicts, is get them to, not get them, I don't mean get them, but it's just a way to use language. To help them get to a place where they are uncomfortable enough to say, I don't think I like this. So you've got people, you're probably sitting in this room, who are really afraid of setting boundaries, like, if you're going to keep doing what you're doing, then you're going to have to leave. You're going to have to leave. You're going to have to go do it somewhere else. Because, oh my God, what if they wind up on the street? What if? What if they die out there? Reality is some of them do, not many. There are not many who do. We hear about some in the same way that we hear about plane crashes. It doesn't happen very often, right? But the addict in your life will need to maybe go to the street and live there for a few days, a week. If that happens, he or she just might decide, you know what, I don't really like it out here. This isn't very fun. I would really rather live in the house I was living in with people who care about me, with running water, with food, with a bed, with... And maybe they'll become a little bit more appreciative of you instead of abusive with you and obnoxious with you. Accepting discomfort is the biggest part of recovery. And on my website, for any of you who are interested, you can write this down. There's a free articles page on my website. And there's an article that I wrote called Allowing Discomfort. You might want to read it if you're having some trouble with what I'm talking about here. In that article, I talk about my own withdrawal from Valium, which I'll tell you, they say it's harder than heroin. I've never used heroin, so I don't know. But coming off Valium is hell on wheels. Everything you used it for, everything that you used it for comes back in spades. It's like, you can't sleep. You're totally anxious. I didn't know my own name for a while. It was crazy. But even while I was going through that, I somehow developed this little mantra that I said to myself. I don't know where this came from. Higher powered. And the mantra was, this feels wrong, but it's right. This really feels wrong to come off Valium. This really feels wrong to not put that substance in my body. I want it, I need it. This feels really wrong, but I know it's the right thing to do. This feels wrong, but it's right. This is what's going to happen for you as you start to come off that roller coaster. This is what's going to happen as you start to set your boundaries and work with somebody around that. It's going to feel wrong. It's going to be right. And when the addict in your life decides to stop doing whatever they're doing, it's going to feel wrong to them, but it'll still be right. So the whole secret is I keep saying getting them, but I don't mean controlling them. Helping them get to a place of feeling discomfort. It's okay. It really is. It's the most loving thing you can do. It really is.
I was just going to say, keeping in mind too that sometimes the addict as uncomfortable as they may be, they might stay like that for years.
For years.
So it's to understand that just because you set boundaries and they get a little uncomfortable for a while, they may be uncomfortable for years, and it's accepting that that's their process, right?
That's
And-
their process, but you need to know how much you're gonna put up with. You
Yeah.
might need to set a different boundary,
Yeah,
you know, because if you put up with it, it's gonna keep happening.
yeah.
That's the
exactly.
other part of the secret.
Yeah,
If you put up with it, it will keep happening.
yeah.
Why shouldn't it? But, you know, there's that question we've all heard, if not now, when? Because I'll probably be doing these talks for a while, and if you don't start doing this boundary set, if you don't start changing what you've been doing, probably in a few years, you'll come back and hear me say the same thing again. After a few years of still putting up with what you've been putting up with. Why not do it now? Most of you are here because you're at the end of your rope. You're not here because, gee, all of a sudden you think you might have an addicted loved one. You're here because you have an addicted loved one. You've been putting up with this for a while. And you've been concerned about it, and worried about it. And if nothing changes, guess what?
You were mentioning that most addictions,
A little bit louder,
you
please.
were mentioning that most addictions, if not all of them, their main purpose is to avoid, the person to avoid problem solving or facing problems
For the addict?
for the addict.
Yes, and for the loved one too.
And for the loved ones. I was wondering, the loved one, the codependent partner or whoever, to what extent does that person get involved in the problem solving as the boundaries are being set and the addiction hopefully is being reduced or eliminated?
So the question, I'll try to nutshell the question. Did everybody hear the question? No? The question is, how much involvement is there for the loved one of trying to,
In the problem solving process, because now the problems are going to come to the surface.
Yep.
Right, because the addiction is going down supposedly or disappearing.
right, okay, so the problems come up because the addiction goes down.
Yeah, and then the codependent partner, how involved is that person in the problem-solving process that's then having to take place?
How involved should the partner or the family be in the problem-solving process that the addict has to go through?
Right.
Okay, great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Great question. In my opinion, professionally and personally, not much. Don't be their counselor. Set a boundary about the fact that you want them to get counseling. What are we, the 14th of May? By the end of May, I expect that you will have called a counselor and set up an appointment. And gone by the end of May. That's how involved I would be if it were me. I would set that boundary, and then if they don't choose to do it, then I've got a different boundary to set. Then I've got to look back at myself and say, okay, what do I do with that? But I think that's a great question. No, don't get involved. You'll stay addicted to the addict's addiction. This is not your job. Your job is to look at you and change you. Okay? Thank you. Yeah.
How about when there's two addictions, workaholism and alcohol?
What about it?
Well, with two partners, one has each addiction.
So what if there's two partners, one has workaholism, one has alcoholism? What about it?
You know, who's the enabler?
Ah, good question. So if you've got two partners who both have an addictive behavior, who don't want to look at reality and don't want to deal with the issues of life and your life tasks, as they talk about in the Adler School, if nobody changes anything, if both partners stay addicted to whatever they're addicted to, you know, it's interesting because in relationships, I've watched this for years, people can stay together for a really long time. Like sometimes people can stay together for 50 years in a marriage, right? And people throw them a party. Wow, they've been married for 50 years, isn't that wonderful? But they have no idea what's going on behind closed doors in that relationship. In a lot of cases, Not always. I mean, there might be some people who are still happy and functioning well in 50 years, but I don't know. Anyway,
Well, sort of
If-
who's the enabler then?
well, you're both enabling
Yeah,
each other. You're
exactly.
enabling
It's a
the addiction.
dance of-
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
dance and enabling
Yeah,
you
yeah.
to not have to face anything. But you know, one of the analogies that I really like to use about that is the Jack in the Box, the toy, the children's toy. So you've got a Jack in the Box, and you've got your life tasks, and you've got your problems, right? And you put them in the Jack in the Box, and you stuff them down, and you stuff them down with whatever addiction you're using, whatever it is. I'm still prone to chocolate as one of them, but I try not to do that with problems. But you stuff it down, you put the lid on the Jack in the Box, and you think, okay, whew, right, I'll stay a workaholic, you stay an alcoholic, we'll be just fine. But you know what happens? When you least expect it.
Oh, yes.
So it's up to you. I mean, if you're in a situation like that, if you want the relationship to go on the way it is, you're probably pretty lonely in it, because people who are addicted to anything are emotionally unavailable most of the time. So if you want it to continue that way, just keep doing what you're doing. If you want something to change, change something. It's a really good question. And there's often, I mean, you know, you've got a drug addict, for example, and you've got a codependent. Same thing going on. Same exact thing going on. Let me just check my notes here. Yeah, that's all I was going to say about the difference between helping and enabling. This is tip number 8, and tip number 8 is on page 115. Know that self-care does not equal selfish. They're not the same thing. Codependent people often feel like they're not supposed to take care of themselves. They're supposed to give and give and give, and especially women. Some men, but especially women, right? Am I right? Give. Make those relationships work. That's your job. And your self-care falls by the wayside. Self-care does not equal selfish. Self-care equals self-ish, and there's a difference. Selfish is about, I want what I want, when I want it right now, I'll step on anybody I have to get what I want, and that's more like the addict than it is the codependent. But of course, the codependent, the people pleaser, what they want is to not have conflict, so they'll do anything to not have conflict. I keep repeating that because it's important. The quote, Gandhi, don't you love this quote? I remember the quote is, be the change you want to see in the world, for the people way in the back. Be the change you want to be, that change. Don't ask somebody else to change something that you're not willing to change. Be that change. Be the role model. It's a wonderful thing. And I was going to say, I remember when I was in Chapter's bookstore several years ago, and they had, you walk in the door and they've got this table set up with all these things, lunch boxes and pencils and notebooks, all with this saying, be the change you want to be. So, or you want to see. Great reminder. But that's your job now, because your eyes are opening tonight. You need to be the change you want to see in somebody else. You need to be that first. Do your own work first. So let me use the well-worn example. When you're flying in an airplane, you know what I'm going to say, right? Mm-hmm. And the flight attendant says, if we hit that dreaded turbulence and the masks come down, what do they say? Put your own mask on first. Why do they say that?
Because you can't help anybody else.
Sorry?
You can't help anybody else, you're not helping yourself.
You can't help somebody else. If you can't breathe, how are you going to help somebody else breathe? But this is, even if you're with somebody, if you're a tiny little child, an infant, you still have to put it's going to be so tempting not to do this. You're still gonna have to put your own mask on first. If you're with somebody who's older than me, somebody who's older or sick and can't put their own mask on, somebody with no arms who can't put their own mask on, you still need to put your own mask on first. You need to do, everything starts with the self. You need to be doing your own inner work to be able to help the loved one in your life. And if you don't do that, I mean, it's a choice, you don't have to do that, but if you don't do that, if you don't make that choice, nothing will change. Pretty much guaranteed. So self-care, which is my favorite topic, I've really had to learn how to take care of myself because I am an addict and I have Crohn's disease and I'm a therapist and I'm female. Whew, 4 strikes. But seriously, I mean, self-care is about self-respect. Self-care is about respecting yourself and caring about yourself enough to take care of yourself before you try to take care of everybody else. That's the hard part. But before you try to take care of everybody else. If I don't take care of myself and I sit across from clients all day, how depleted am I going to get? How burned out am I going to get? It's the same for you. So there are 4 pillars, I guess, of self-care. There's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. They are all very important. The physical, of course, is you are what you eat. What you put in your body matters. What you don't put in your body matters. How you might want to adorn your body. How you might want to take care of yourself physically, your hygiene, all of that. Physical self-care, self-respect, enough to take care of yourself. Emotional, are you dealing with something that you need to talk about? What's going on for you emotionally? What's happening for you? Do you have somebody to bounce that off? Mental, especially when you get to be a little older and you cannot for the life of you remember what you've come into this room for, over and over. You have to keep your mind sharp. Keeping your mind sharp with something that you enjoy, a language, maybe taking music lessons or something like that, a class about something you like. Take care of yourself. Enjoy. Do something you like with like-minded people. Spiritually, for some people that means religion. That means going to church. That means praying. That means, for other people, that means going for a walk in nature, meditating, whatever that means to you. Like God, grant me the serenity, whatever that means to you. But those 4 things need to be taken care of. And there's this great acronym in 12-step programs. Again, I wish so much that I could have been the one who came up with these wonderful things, but I can't claim them. It's called HALT. How many of you know HALT? Okay. HALT, which stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I love that it spells HALT because I'm a big believer that when in doubt, do nothing until you know what you need to do. When in doubt, do nothing. But if I'm not feeling quite up to snuff, if something's going on for me, halt, stop. What do I need to do to take care of myself? Am I hungry? Do I need a snack? Is my blood sugar low? Am I angry or feeling any other kind of emotion? Sadness, grief? Do I need to talk to somebody about that? Do I need to tell the person I'm angry at that I'm angry with them? Do I need to be assertive with somebody? Lonely. Do I need to call my best friend for a play date? How long has it been? Connection. And tired. Am I getting enough sleep? If you're not getting enough sleep, go to your doctor. It might be hormonal. It might be something that you can do something about. Or maybe you just need a nap with your teddy. And if you don't have a teddy, go get one. Definitely. So HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Yes. In my book, I talk about the difference between the people pleaser's creed and the self-care creed. So if you have a book, it's on page 117. So the people pleaser's creed, if you're a people pleaser, this is what you're going to think to yourself most of the time. I must never, or to quote Taylor Swift, ever, 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 ever hurt another person's feelings. I must never, ever hurt anybody else's feelings. That's the people pleaser's creed. That's how they get through life. And you become way more important to me than I am because I can't hurt you, so I'm going to suffer instead. Because I might hurt your feelings, when really the reason I'm not telling you that I'm angry with you is because I don't want you getting angry back at me. Oh my God. That's the people pleaser's creed. The self-care creed, love this one. Although I care about other people's feelings, the way I feel about myself is most important to me.
Yes.
Yes. And that's how I feel today, more than the other, which I'm very happy to tell you, because it used to be the other way around. I care whether you're finding this talk helpful. I care about what you think of me. I'm human. I care about that. But today, what I feel about me is more important to me than what you feel about me. Oh, it is such a better way to live. It's the difference between having self-respect and not having self-respect. And I'm talking self-respect, not necessarily self-esteem. I think there's a difference. If you don't feel like you have self-respect, you probably don't have much, and you can get it. It's an inside job. I can't give it to you. Nobody could have given it to me. You can't go buy it at 7-Eleven. It's not our partner's job to give to us. It's about doing the things we need to do and not doing the things we shouldn't be doing that give us that self-respect, little by little. I think that's all I need to say about self-care. Any question?
Oh, I wanted you to repeat that sentence because I couldn't hear you very well.
I will repeat that sentence.
Thank you.
I would love to repeat that sentence. I live to repeat that sentence.
Thank you.
Although I care about other people's feelings, the way I feel about myself is most important to me.
Thank you.
My pleasure. In closing, I absolutely love butterflies. Somebody's got, is that a butterfly? Your necklace?
No.
No, it looks like butterflies. Pretty cool. I love butterflies. There are butterflies on this book. There are butterflies on the workbook. There are butterfly things all over my house because people give them to me because they know I love butterflies. I make it easy for people to give me gifts. So just give me butterflies. See, somebody gave me these folders. Right? I don't just love butterflies because they're beautiful. I love butterflies because butterflies start out as caterpillars. Ew! You know, little boys love to squish caterpillars, and little girls love to shriek when they see one, and they get dissected in biology class and they're thrown out. Ew! Caterpillar! But a caterpillar has an instinct, a really, really important instinct. A caterpillar knows at some point, if they don't change, they're going to die. They have to change. They have to. So they create this amazing cocoon around themselves. And I didn't know this, but somebody told me recently that in the cocoon, a butterfly basically changes its entire DNA, kind of dissolves itself and becomes something different. Isn't that amazing? And so it stays in this supportive cocoon that it's wrapped around itself for as long as it takes. It sits in bug juice. I'm inviting you to sit in your own bug juice for as long as it takes, please. And when it's done, and it's ready, and not a second before, because if it comes out too soon, it won't be able to fly. If it comes out too late, it'll die. So when it's ready, it comes out, and it's this most amazing, beautiful creature, and nobody says, ew, a butterfly. People say, wow, butterfly. That's why I love butterflies. Because I was a caterpillar for such a long time. And I'm a butterfly today. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't have growth periods sometimes that make my hair stand on end, because I do, I'm human, but I'm a butterfly. I'll get through it. I'll have my self-respect. I'm not giving that up. I know what it's like to live without it. No way that's going to happen. Butterflies are really important to me, and I believe in every single person's butterfly potential. Every one of you in here can be a butterfly, if you aren't already. And every addict that you love can be a butterfly, because here I am standing in front of you, a suicidal addict. Anybody can make that choice. It just takes some work. Resources. Let me just touch on that really briefly. Well, we started a few minutes late. If anybody has to leave at 8:30, let's do that. Please take care of yourself. But I'd like to go for maybe 5 minutes over, just in terms of questions. So I'll understand if people get up to leave. So resources. You know, some of these treatment centers have week-long family programs. They are expensive. These treatment centers, most of them are expensive. I have not gone to one of these week-long programs, but I hear from my clients that they're amazing. They just change people's lives, and they deal with codependency. They're dealing with people like you, helping people like you do this work. So there's Edgewood, there's Cedars, there's Pacifica, and there's probably other places that, am I right, Perry? There are other places that have family programs.
Yeah, there's many.
Yeah. More now than there ever have been, which is a really good thing. And there's, if you're in the White Rock, Surrey-ish area, there's a place called Sources, BC, that has an Affected Others group. You are Affected Others. You could check that out, it's free. There's one on the North Shore as well that a friend of mine runs. If you're interested in these, you can email me and I'll be happy to tell you about them. I don't want to take a lot of time right now, but I'm happy to be of service that way to you. So my email address is on the bookmarks and cards there and on the book as well. That's, you know, and like I said, I do some workshops to help other therapists and counselors learn how to help people like you. So maybe you might want to find a skilled counselor who can help you sort out some of these things for yourself. Ask them, interview them. Do you work with loved ones of addicts? How do you do that? You know? Unfortunately, that's really all I have for resources, but there may be more that I don't know of. So I'll leave that as a caveat. And the last thing I'll say is that this is my magic wand. It has seen better days. We should all have a magic wand. The problem is I can't find where to put batteries into it, and there's no on-off switch, so the damn thing doesn't work, but it's really pretty. So there's no magic wand, there's no magic answer, there's no magic pill. There's work to do. There's butterfly changing to do. If you want to help yourself and the people that you love so dearly, do the work, be the change you want to see. Questions? Yes?
How do you feel about the non-Al-Anon
Al-Anon.
as far as
Resources,
codependency
yes. Thank you, because I knew I was forgetting something, so I appreciate that. Yes, definitely, there are 12-step programs for people who are in alignment with 12-step programs, for whom that works. And you might not know whether it's going to work for you unless you try it a few times. They're really very excellent. So there's Al-Anon, which is for partners and friends and loved ones of alcoholics. There's Nar-Anon, which is different from Narc-Anon. You don't want Narc-Anon. That's kind of a cult-like group. Be careful of that one. 12-step programs are free. That's one of the ways that you can distinguish. So Nar-Anon is for partners of people with narcotic or drug addiction. There's Codependence Anonymous, which is a great group, helped me a lot. And that's here in Vancouver. You can Google all of this. And there's ACOA as well, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics or other dysfunctional families. Doesn't have to be alcoholics anymore. Because many loved ones have also grown up in addictive homes. So you may have children or partners in your life who are addicted, but you are also a loved one of your own parents, perhaps, or a sibling that might have been, you know. So adult children of alcoholics, you might be an adult child of a dysfunctional family, and it might help you a lot to go to some of these groups and just see how it feels for you. There are lots of books, too, at bookstores like Banyan, Odin, you know, Whitby's.
There's also Alateen.
Alateen, Alatot for the children. Thank you.
There's another Vancouver group, Parents Forever.
Parents Forever, great one. They split off from Grief to Action, which is, you know, if you Google this, you will find some resources for yourself, maybe some that I haven't named. So just don't be afraid to go out and find it. You don't have to suffer by yourself. If you have been, you don't have to do that. Any other questions, comments?